Good afternoon, everyone. This is meeting number 61 of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts, Wednesday, May 31st, 2017. I would remind all our committee members, as well as those in our audience today, that we are televised, and so I would encourage you to shut off or to mute your communication devices so that they don't interfere with our meeting. We will have time for committee business after our first 90 minutes with our witnesses. And today we are considering report number 4, mental health support for members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police of the spring 2017 reports of the Auditor General of Canada. We have as our witnesses today from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Michael Ferguson, the Auditor General of Canada, welcome, and Joanne Butler, Principal with the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. We also have from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, we have Commissioner of the RCMP, Bob Paulson, welcome, and he is accompanied by Daniel Dubois, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Human Resource Officer, as well as Joanne Pratt, Assistant Commissioner and Chief Audit and Evaluation Executive. I understand that both of our witnesses have an opening statement. Before we turn to questions from the members of Parliament, I'll invite our Auditor General to bring his statement at this time, please.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie.
Mr. Chair, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to discuss our Spring 2017 report on mental health support for members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
RCMP introduced its 5-year mental health strategy to contribute to a psychologically healthy and safe workplace and to provide greater support to its employees. The strategy defined mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her own community. Our audit focused on whether RCMP members had access to mental health support that met their needs. We examined selected mental health programs and services that supported 2 key areas of the RCMP's mental health strategy: early detection and intervention, and continuous improvement. We concluded that overall members of the RCMP did not have access to mental health support that met their needs. The RCMP took the important step of introducing a mental health strategy. However, it did not make implementation of the selected mental health programs and services a priority, and it did not commit the necessary resources to support them. Therefore, these programs and services were only partially implemented. Through our representative file review, we found that although 57% of members received easy and timely access to the mental health support they needed, 16% did not. For 27% of members, the RCMP didn't have records that allowed us to assess whether they received the help they needed when they needed it. Support for members doesn't stop with providing access to mental health treatment. Health services staff and members' supervisors are responsible for monitoring and supporting members while they are on off-duty sick leave and when they're ready to return to work. However, we found that member supervisors and health services staff didn't always monitor members on leave as they were supposed to, and they did not adequately support members when they were ready to return to work. Some members told us that this lack of support exacerbated their mental health conditions and delayed their return to work. We found that 1 in 5 members who sought mental health support from a health services office didn't return to work or took a discharge from the RCMP.
Finally, we found that the RCMP did not have performance measures to evaluate its mental health strategy and to ensure that it worked as intended to support members' needs. The organization did not have a quality assurance framework or monitor its activities to support continuous improvement. As a result, the RCMP did not systematically collect or report information on the results of the programs and services designed to support the strategy. For the strategy to succeed, the RCMP must know whether the programs and services meet members' needs, provide value for money, and reduce negative personal and organizational impacts. These findings matter because the RCMP is only as strong as its members. If the organization does not effectively manage members' mental health and support their return to work, members will struggle to carry out their duties, and their confidence in the RCMP could be undermined, and the RCMP's effectiveness may be reduced. Ultimately, the poor mental health of some of its members can affect the RCMP's capacity to serve and protect Canadians. The mental health strategy is important for the RCMP, for Canadians, and for the government as a whole. And it has to succeed. The problems we identified must be fixed to ensure the strategy's successful implementation. The RCMP is in the third year of the strategy, and there is still an opportunity to make the necessary improvements. We are pleased to report that the RCMP has agreed with our 7 recommendations. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks, and I will be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. And now we'll turn to our Commissioner of the RCMP.
Monsieur le Président, membres du comité.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, hello, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. My comments will mostly be in English, but you also have a French version of my comments.
General for their report. The overall well-being of the RCMP and the members and employees is of great importance to me as Commissioner and to the RCMP as a whole. A healthy workforce is critical to the RCMP's ability to achieve its mandate. As we continue to implement our mental health strategy, the OAG's recommendations will certainly assist us in our efforts, and I'm confident that we will continue to improve. Mental health services and programs need to be continuously evolving. Accordingly, we have accepted all 7 of the OAG's recommendations, and we look forward to working quickly to fully implement them. This notwithstanding, I would like to highlight several areas that were not addressed or perhaps reflected in an unnecessarily negative light in the OAG's reports and findings. In 2014, the RCMP was one of the first federal departments to implement a comprehensive 5-year mental health strategy. This strategy, which is still in the process of implementation, focuses on 5 key areas: promotion, education, prevention, early detection and intervention, and continuous improvement. Of these 5 areas, only 2, early detection and intervention and continuous improvement, were examined by the Office of the Auditor General. As a result, the audit does not provide a complete view of all the work that is being done within the RCMP to address mental health. While the audit scope included the following programs, services, and activities: the Road to Mental Readiness Training, peer-to-peer system, periodic health assessments, RCMP health service offices, RCMP healthcare entitlements and benefits, and disability case management, it did not include key programs and activities such as Health Canada's Employee Assistance Services, which is a confidential service available to all RCMP employees 24/7, the RCMP Chaplain Program, the Member Workplace Services Program, the work of the National and Divisional Mental Health Champions, the significant efforts the organization has made to reduce the stigma around mental illness, or the overall success of the RCMP mental health strategy. Several of the OAG's recommendations relate to disability management of RCMP members. Due to the timing of the audit, the OAG was unable to assess the RCMP's Enhanced Disability Management and Accommodation Program, which we launched on April 1st, 2017, with a significant investment of new resources from our existing appropriations. In 2016, the RCMP allocated $4.8 million in ongoing funding for the program, including funding for 30 disability management advisors. To date, 25 disability management advisors and 7 disability management coordinators have been hired. During the course of its audit, the OIG reviewed a small sampling of RCMP regular and civilian members' medical case files, 51 in total, selected on the basis of services received. In 37 of the files, the OIG determined there was sufficient information on the file to assess whether members received access to mental health services in a timely manner, and determined that 78% of these members did receive timely access. However, members' medical files do not capture early intervention measures that do not fall under health services, such as the confidential counseling provided through employee assistance services. Further, this review was completed by individuals who do not have medical expertise to assess the type of information found within the files. The OIG also surveyed active and off-duty sick members. As the RCMP was only in year 2 of implementing its mental health strategy at the time of the audit, a number of off-duty sick members surveyed were not aware of the strides the RCMP had made in supporting members with mental health injuries. As a result, the responses of those members off-duty sick since prior to the release of the mental health strategy may not have reflected the RCMP's current reality. The statistics as presented by the OIG highlight areas for improvement, but overall the statistics are relatively positive. For example, the survey results show that 73% of active duty respondents felt that RCMP members have easy access to mental health programs and services if needed. 75% of members felt that access was timely. In addition, findings from the file review showed that 4 out of 5 members, or 80%, who are off-duty sick for mental health reasons will return to work in either a full or accommodated capacity. The reality is that we will likely never achieve a 100% return to work rate, especially given the nature of the mental health issues being experienced by some of our members, issues that cause some members to take more than one period off-duty sick, or ODS. Furthermore, given the type of work our members perform, it is not realistic to expect that all members ODS will be able to return to work and or carry out the same duties they performed prior to their illness. The RCMP is committed to delivering Road to Mental Readiness training to all 30,000 employees by March 31st, 2018. It is already part of the curriculum at the RCMP's Training Academy, and all new RCMP members have this foundational mental health training before they start their first day as a police officer. Additionally, the peer-to-peer program has evolved over the last couple of years. Today, employees have access to 442 peer-to-peer coordinators and advisors across the country, with more due to come on strength in June 2017. While the audit concluded the RCMP did not consistently or completely implement programs across all divisions, this is a positive example that our programs are still growing. It is equally important to note that the RCMP is not denying mental health services to its employees. Although the RCMP provides a range of mental health benefits under its health benefits program, not all services are covered. Our health services officers are not treating physicians, and we rely on medical services and support from the public health care system, the same as other Canadians. For the RCMP to have its own network of treating physicians and clinics would require a significant investment of resources to implement and sustain. The OIG noted in its report that the RCMP did not provide sufficient funding and human resources to support new programs. I want to stress that the RCMP has a dedicated health services team that does a commendable job supporting RCMP members. The RCMP recognizes that additional resources are required in certain areas, and we are currently conducting a thorough analysis of our resource requirements to identify an adequate level of funding to support all initiatives stemming from the OIG's recommendations, as well as those initiatives not covered by the audit. In the interim, the RCMP continues to offer new mental health programs and services to its employees. These include a 2-day applied suicide intervention skills training and online suicide prevention and awareness training from the Canadian Police Knowledge Network, a 10-year longitudinal research study of RCMP cadets to identify variables that may be associated with the development of operational stress injuries, a 3-year fitness strategy, and an RCMP-led operational stress injury peer support program based on best practices of Veterans Affairs Canada and the Department of National Defence to provide assessment, treatment, prevention skills and support to RCMP members with a mental health disorder resulting from such an injury. En terminant, je souligne que la
In closing, I would like to stress that the RCMP is fiercely dedicated to taking care of our employees, including their mental health. This also includes changing our culture and any outdated attitudes that mental healthness is in any way less serious than a physical injury. We will continue working hard to ensure that all employees impacted by a mental health issue are supported and will have the necessary resources and services that they need to meet their needs. Thank you. My colleagues and I would be happy to answer your questions.
Commissioner, and we will now turn to our first round of questions. Monsieur Lefebvre, vous avez 7 minutes.
Merci.
Mr. Lefebvre, you have 7 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As you know, when we receive these reports by the Auditor General, we always look at the ones that we want to look at first. For personally, which ones that we would like to emphasize. And for me, seeing the mental health support or the strategy that had been suggested back in 2014 and where we're at, and the lacunes, basically the issues that were still pervasive when the audit occurred, is very disturbing. I'm glad to see that there is progress. However, we've seen this record before at this committee. And one of the issues that keeps coming up is that a lot of departments have plans. They have a strategic plan. They put into place. They come up with this great vision, but the strategic plan is there, but there's no basically backup plan to implement. So there's no critical path, and I'm always shocked about that to see that on a consistent basis. And this is a bit that this follows in that same road. Before I ask Mr. Paulson a few questions, just to the Auditor General, I was wondering your comment on in your statement about the audit. You said in a statement you say the RCMP management refused to confirm that the findings in this report were factually based because of disagreement about the approach used to report statistics from the file review and member survey. Can you just comment on that? Because that's a disturbing statement to make, that there was this disagreement on the data that you collected with respect to the RCMP. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a standard practice that we have when we are doing an audit, is that we ask the entity to confirm that the findings were factually based. In this case, the RCMP would not agree that the findings were factually based because of, as we say, their disagreements about the approach used to report statistics from the file review and the member survey. And I think we just heard the Commissioner mention that we put in the report 20% of members were not able to return to work. I think the Commissioner referred to it as the other side of that being the 80%. But really, in those statistics, what you have is 20% that were not able to return to work, 30% that were able to return to their duties that they were doing before, and 50% that were able to return to work but had to return to other duties, not the job they were originally doing. So that can have an impact on the RCMP's, their staffing, because they've got people that they hired to do one job that go on off-duty sick leave and have to come back to another job. So I think that some of these disagreements were about the way that we characterized, for example, that we said 20% were not able to return to work, which we think is the right way of characterizing it. The RCMP obviously has their view on how that should be characterized. But we feel that what's important here is understanding that 20% were not able to return to work, and in fact 50% had to return to reduced duties. So in our view, that shows that there is significant room for improvement on the results of this program.
How often, Mr. Auditor General, Mr. Ferguson, that there are disagreements in your audits with the department that you're auditing?
It doesn't happen often. I can't think right now of another time it has happened since I've been in this job where the organization would not sign off we're not asking them to sign off on our conclusions or on what we are drawing from the findings, but just that the facts, that the findings are factually based. So I believe this is the first, or if not, it would have only happened one other time since I've been in this role.
Thank you. Obviously, Mr. Poulsen, I'd like to hear your comments on that. It's disturbing to see that after many audits from the Auditor General's office in the past number of years now, that is the first time that there's the characterization of statistics or data, or certainly findings in a report is actually contested by an organization. So can you just clarify that, please, for us?
Well, I will. And first of all, let me say that we take no issue with the recommendations and the results of the audit. So that is not what we were doing. I think where the issue came, and I'll ask my chief audit executive to put some precision around that. It's a very broad program that we have. It's a very ambitious program that we have. And I think, from my point of view, it is, and the Auditor General's work was value added in the end because we accept all of the recommendations. But I think the possibility of the sort of sweeping condemnation, my words, is very strong about the RCMP's resolve and intention to provide proper services for its members. And in the eliciting of the information that the Auditor General relies upon, it's there, I think, where we took some exception, which is not to say that we disagree with the findings. We disagree with the manner in which some of the data was used to produce those findings or produce those recommendations. Maybe Joanne can add to that.
Yeah, it's just the approach and how the statistics were presented, in our opinion, could have been presented in a balanced way to allow for the reader of the report to understand the extent or the scope of the issue, right? So, for example, on the survey results themselves, which is in the report, regular members, our total regular member and civilian member population is 22,237. Of that, 6,769 members, active members, responded to the survey. Our ODS member population, the survey was hard copies sent out to members currently on ODS, which is 30 days or longer, was 828. And of that, 261 members responded to the survey. And when you go into the exhibit that's in the report and the manner in which it's represented, it really did focus in on the very negative aspects of that, as opposed to the balance of, say, 73% of active members and 46% ODS members responding that they had easy access, 75% of active members, 49% of ODS members. And when you look at the 49% of ODS members, it'd be like 100 and some members responding, had timely access. 77% and 53% of ODS respondents were aware of the mental health strategy, and 74% of active respondents and 64% of ODS respondents knew how to access mental health services.
Thank you. I got a feeling we may be coming back to some of this. We'll now move over to Mr. McColman, please. Mr. McColman, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here today to go over these points that the Auditor General has put before us. I want to get a sense of the kind of disabilities you're dealing with. Give us some examples within the ranks of the kind of disabilities that are referred to throughout the report in terms of disability case management, setting up the solution for that, and expand, if you can, how that disability case management solution will help facilitate members receiving the support they need to return to work as soon as and is safe for them to do so. So what kind of recurring disabilities are you seeing, if any, or are they one-offs, and what might they be?
Yeah, thank you. I'll take that question. So the recurring disability, so one of our issues, and I think the audit was rightly so, did pick up is our software doesn't pick up the disabilities as much as we would like because we use a certain system and we're purchasing another system. So, but if you go off the VAC data, so we go with Veterans Affairs and they provide us data. So recurring one, if you look on serving members, one of the broadest ones, and most of our serving members would be PTSD. You have a high incidence of PTSD, which could be very broad because PTSD is just one symptom. You have depression. We have done research in certain areas where alcoholism or drug dependency is not high, so that's the good news. But you would see more on the mood swings, the depression. PTSD is one that many of our serving members will get a pension for. So that would be the type of injuries you'd have. But then you also have the physical injuries coming along with that. So that's probably what you would call the recurring ones that we're seeing that trend. And we're trying to drill down on that. So that is part of the role and trying to get that software up so we can get a better idea. To get a better idea what's going across force, what type of injuries are happening, so that we're able to try to do something with that and hopefully prevent them from happening. So that was.
But the case management aspect of your question is to have case managers working on the specific cases to make sure that the support and the care is being aligned quickly and directly with the view continually, always, to get people back to work, get them well, get them back to work.
Okay. Both the Auditor General's audit on support for members' mental health and the RCMP's 2014 internal audit of RCMP members' long-term sick leave identified problems with supervisors fulfilling their roles and responsibilities to support members on off-duty sick leave. And this relates in the report to paragraphs 4.85 and 4.86. What does the RCM believe the reason is for this lack of support? And what steps are you taking to address the problem?
Okay, well, I'll start and maybe I'll ask Dan to weigh in. What we're talking about, at least in 2014, and I would defer to the Auditor General to elucidate on their findings, was that supervisors basically just get the note from their members to say, look, I'm not coming into work, I got a doctor's note, I'm not coming to work, I'm sick. And there is a certain tension, or at least there was a certain tension around the privacy-related aspects of that sickness and how far a supervisor could inquire. Our focus is to have the supervisors in a sort of preventive, anticipatory role, notice, participate, getting members to support prior to that sort of declared absence from work. And the view of most supervisors, and some of it's accurate, frankly, that some members don't want to be getting calls from the office about when they're coming back to work. So it's the interface with the employee once they've gone off duty sick.
Yeah, and if I may, the disability management role, the advisor role, when you hear us talk about disability managers, are people that will hire with those skill sets to help the supervisor to actually coach them through this. Because at times, our supervisors aren't really sure how to approach a member who may be suffering from a mental health issue or maybe on sick leave. So it's to help, to become the link, to help coach along and also bring the whole team along, supervisor, our health services, our workplace advisors, as well as the employee to work together to come to a solution and to get the right treatment. So that's the key part for us, is to bring them up, which is why we are deploying that program.
Now, I'm sure that the RCMP has various categories of employees that are required to be hired. Not all of them are frontline officers in terms of being able to go on patrol and do the things that a normal police constable has to do. What is the RCMP's policy, if any, for hiring people with disabilities?
So to be a serving police officer?
No, not to be a serving police officer.
Also,
because
we
a
do
lot of
hire,
people, a lot of people with disabilities would not be able to function in that.
Yeah, so we do hire.
But
people.
you do hire people in other categories within
Yes.
yours. What's your policy?
Our policy is we respect the Human Rights Act. We will hire people with disabilities. We do hire people with disabilities, and we have serving police officers right now that have disabilities that would identify themselves as having a disability. So we have both, even in the serving ranks.
Can you give me an idea of the proportion of people within the ranks that have with disabilities?
I will see what I have it in here. Bear with me. Sorry, it's on here.
Yeah.
So I don't want to lead you astray here. But so our ranks now. So we would go into our system. Our people that would identify themselves, self-identify with disabilities, would be serving police officers would be 1.9%.
Okay, thank you very much, 1.9%. Now, with the Auditor General identifying, as he has, and you accepting the recommendations and there's an action plan put in place, there's still, I think, a tone today, Commissioner, with all due with respectfully to you, to say that essentially you're agreeing, but in some ways disagreeing. Am I correct in sensing that from your comments?
No, I think you're correct in sensing the tone, and it's not anything other than, you know, the organization, as the Auditor General identified, was one of the first departments to organize themselves and develop a mental health strategy and an action plan and deploy it. And apart from it being in 2014, you know, we have two pieces, two sort of tranches of that strategy audited and very critical results. And I think all I was trying to do was to put a sort of context around it to say that it's not as if we're not working towards our employees' mental health and providing a very innovative and I think successful strategy to supporting these members. But it's in the policing context. And that's a very difficult context, and it's also in a labor context, which is, you know, changing for the RCMP. So it's a very difficult time. And I take no issue at all with the fact that we got some tremendous advice and tremendous recommendations out of this, and we're going to act on those and implement them, and we'll be accountable for that. But it came at a time when other reports were coming out, and the broken wall report from the CRCC and the other reports, and it's perhaps a little defensiveness on my part.
Yeah, I noticed that defensiveness and
health strategy, and we have a series of initiatives that we are funding from within our own appropriations, and we're doing it not as well as we could do, obviously, but we're doing it. And I think we need a little recognition for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll come back. We'll now go to Mr. Christofferson, please, for 7 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for being here today. I feel the need, just because of the subject matter, to begin with my own respect and my own involvement in policing, not at the federal level, but at the provincial level. As a former Solicitor General of Ontario, I know a little bit more about policing than most civilians, and am close enough to it, have the greatest respect for policing, and understand the challenges. But I got to tell you, Commissioner, I am woefully disappointed in this approach. Now, I'm listening to your last remarks, and you feel like, you know, the RCMP's feelings have been hurt, that you're not getting enough credit for the things you do. Right? Well, let me finish, sir, and then I will give you the floor, sir, when I am done. Thank you. I'm expressing my own opinion, and I welcome your response to it. But I take this to be a very defensive document. I'm very disappointed that your approach wasn't, yes, this is really important. We failed to do what we should have done, and we're going to make the changes that are necessary. Now, you can say that you accepted the recommendations, but you know that's an easy thing to say, and then to turn around. I'm going to tell you too, this business of challenging whether or not the documents are fair and whether our Auditor General is fair, this is key to the work we do. And I hope we spend a little bit of time at the end either talking about it further, because at some point I'm ready to bring in an outside body. The RCMP is an important international organization. If they are accusing our Auditor General being unfair, I want that pursued. Because if the Auditor General is being unfair, we'll deal with that. But if he's not, then I'm not going to accept department heads and agencies come in here and questioning the professionalism. You either accept it or say condemn it and prove it. So at the very least, I would hope that they put their issues in writing and send it to us, because we will take it seriously. And if this document is not fair, we need to know that, because that's a key thing that we're working with. But we're going to go on the assumption that what's here is correct. And again, and I'll get to my questions, Chair, it's just that we've been around and around and around with the RCMP on these things. First of all, it's so hard to get them to accept when they've made a mistake or when things aren't perfect. Then we finally get to that point, and then they finally bring in, and they're forced to do something. We just had a report from the CRCC the other day, another failed implementation. Again, did all the right things, made all the right announcements, but it's the follow-up, and it didn't happen. And that's what we're about here. So my very first question is, on page 5, the Auditor General says, under overall message, overall, we found that the RCMP did not adequately meet its members' mental health needs. The RCMP was one of the first federal government agencies to introduce a mental health strategy. However, it did not make the strategy's implementation a priority or commit the human and financial resources needed for the strategy's full and effective implementation. I'd like to know your response to that overall message, Commissioner, and I would welcome a chance for you to take as much latitude as you want to respond to anything I said and my tone. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christofferson. Mr. Paulson, please.
Well, I agree with the Auditor General's findings as you've described them. I agree that we failed to deliver adequate mental health support for our members. I also would like to stress that we are engaged, and we're engaged in an active undertaking to do so. We were at the time that the audit took place, and we're even more so with the assistance of the Auditor General's recommendations. So to characterize this response to the Auditor General's work as anything other than helpful is incorrect. We took issue with some of the methodology, as I think we are entitled to do. And if you'd like us to send it to you, because we sent it to the Auditor General, we'll send it to you, and you can make your own findings. Because we didn't do it because we're defensive. In fact, if there's anything that I would like to stress to you, sir, is that we are not defensive. We are not defensive. I am open to principled, evidence-based criticisms and suggestions on how to make this organization better. And that is my response to your question.
Another minute if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, great, thanks. Okay, well, let's jump into it then. Look, again, I'm with the Auditor General here. You did a great thing in announcing it, but it's so important to the government for this to work, but it doesn't look like it was treated that way. That's the problem. So on page 9, 4.38, the Auditor General says, we found the RCMP did not put a business plan in place or allocate resources to support its new mental health strategy. When I look over at the response, your response, sir, is the purpose of the action plan is to identify the components of the strategies that will receive particular attention, to identify the specifics, to address them, and blah, blah. As, quote, as the annual action plan does not include resource requirements, the RCMP will transform it into a business plan designed specifically to guide implementation efforts for the final 2 years of the strategy. Why wasn't money put up front? Rather than coming in and saying, oh, we're doing all that and we're going to make it all fine in the last couple of years. The criticism here is that you didn't do that from the get-go. Why not?
Mr. Christofferson, Commissioner.
Well, the way I understand the criticism is that there wasn't a business case in the classic sense of what a business case is. So, in other words, and again, I defer to the Auditor General, aligning specific funding allocations in a document to specific initiatives. That's what I understood. But we can sit here for the next 15 minutes and tell you how much money we've put towards all these initiatives, because we have done that.
Well, business plan, sir.
I didn't have a formal business plan, but we had a strategy and an action plan, which didn't constitute a business plan.
Because they didn't have any money.
Just let him carry on.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize.
Commissioner?
No, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Thank you. We'll go back to Mr. Area now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would have loved to see Auditor General also, in addition to the 2 areas he did audit on, the early detection and intervention and continuous improvement, I wish he had gone into the first area of the strategy, that is the promotion. Several RCMP officers have come to me and they have expressed their frustration on the lack of diversity within the RCMP middle management, top management ranks. When I say diversity, it includes women, it includes indigenous people, it includes visible minorities, it includes people with disabilities. And I know the frustration leads to mental illness problems. Now, coming to specific thing, continuing what Mr. Christopherson was asking, Audit General clearly says that you did not commit human and financial resources needed to fully and effective for the full and effective implementation of this strategy. And specifically, he says that the RCMP did not allocate budgets to support them. I know you spent some money, but the question is, the amount you allocated, was it adequate?
So I think in some areas, I think the criticism is that the money allocated wasn't adequate. I think the major criticism, as I understood it, was that there wasn't a sort of comprehensive business approach to estimating, securing, and providing commensurate funding with all of those initiatives. That's what I understood to be the principal criticism.
My point is that we are in the third year of the 5-year plan. So, almost 2/3 is getting over. At this point, to say that there was not adequate budget to implementation, then it's a problem because we have got only 2 years left. Then you did also say that Auditor General examined only 2 of the 5 areas, so it did not provide the complete view on the work being done. So what is the work being done on the promotion side of the strategy?
Okay, well, I'll invite Dan to speak to that, but there's multiple approaches to the promotion of the strategy across the existing hierarchy of the organization. Very decentralized organization, so commanding officers in each division that are charged with having the identification of champions that exist in all of the divisions with initiatives. And we can name a series of initiatives that happened across the organization, but that is by and large the promotion component of the strategy.
And in the middle management and top management levels, how is the diversity there now?
Well, I thought it was very, very good. We have very good numbers in diversity. I take advice from a number of committees on diversity, on gender issues, and Dan will have our numbers, but they're very good.
Will you kindly pass on those numbers? Oh, thank you. Yes, and question to the Auditor General is that when is it possible for you to go back and look at the remaining parts of the strategy, the first 3 areas of the strategy?
Thank you. Currently, we don't have any plans to do that. I think part of maybe what's important, though, is in the course of the audit, we also found that the RCMP didn't have an approach to really report on what the success of the plan was overall. So if they're going to develop a way to measure, whether the plan is doing, the strategy is doing what it was supposed to do, then we would expect that should include all components of their strategy, and we would hope that sometime in the future the RCMP would be able to report on the success of the strategy, including the components that we didn't look at in the audit.
And you mentioned that RCMP did not allocate budgets to support them, and these things were only partially implemented. Can we get some sort of numbers? How much was spent and how much do you think should have been spent?
I'll ask Ms. Butler to provide the details, but I think fundamentally we asked for some numbers about what was spent, and the RCMP wasn't tracking the numbers at that level of detail at that point in time. But I'll ask Ms. Butler if she's got anything to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the Auditor General said, we made inquiries at the national level as well as the divisional to find out the costing for the mental health programs being implemented. And it was explained to us that practices differed across divisions, But most importantly, the programs, as they were being implemented, were being done in some circumstances on a voluntary basis. So, you know, salaries are obviously documented, but the actual time spent implementing, for example, R2MR or peer-to-peer would be difficult to cost. So that type of explanation was provided to us.
Commissioner, Auditor General reported that 1 in 5 members who sought mental health support from a health services office did not return to work or took a discharge from RCMP, and you seem to imply that that is not a big number. At least for me, maybe I don't have experience in the organizations like RCMP. For me, the 20% appears to be huge number. And how do you say that? It does not imply to be too big.
Yeah, no, I don't think I implied that it wasn't a big number. I was relating that we've had success, and one of the successes of our approach has been to secure 80% return to work. Because there was a time in 2012 when I first became commissioner, and I spoke to some of these people in the room here today, around the state of our health care in the organization. There were extended people on unsupervised sick leave that had been on sick leave for years and years. And so part of the success of our strategy in the mental health, and indeed across the broader health management issues for the organization, is taking an approach consistent with our efforts at transforming the culture to have people come back to work, to be accommodated at work. There is a tension between the idea that people are police officers, and in order to be a contributing member to the RCMP, you have to be able to carry your gun and be fit and make arrests and do all the things that go along with that. And we've evolved our thinking in that regard. So I don't dispute that 20% is not a big number. I'm just saying 80% is a positive outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Area, and thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Now back to the opposition side and to Mr. Genereux, please, for second round for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for being here today. First of all, to the members of the RCMP, thank you for your service, particularly for what you do for us here on Parliament Hill. It's a service that we all certainly appreciate. Please pass it on to other members of your force. Do want to, before I get into the line of questioning I would prepared to do want to give the Auditor General an opportunity to respond to some of the criticism that was levied towards the report, particularly the comments that the report wasn't presented in a balanced way. I would like to clarify for the record, Mr. Ferguson, if you may, if you wish, I guess, to do some of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think, first of all, I want to point out that we acknowledged in a number of places, and I've acknowledged every time that I've talked about this report, that the RCMP was one of the first organizations to put a mental health strategy in place, and that was an important step, and I think I've acknowledged that. We acknowledge it in writing, and I've acknowledged it every time that I've spoken to it. I think I've also said that this is an important strategy that needs to succeed. And that's not just, it's not just for the RCMP to make this succeed, or for this to be important to succeed. This is important for the government as a whole, because the RCMP is one of the first organizations to have this strategy in place. So the whole government should be invested in helping the RCMP make this succeed. So that would be the first thing. In terms of some of the numbers, some of the percentages, yes, you can look at the percentages both ways. What we were concerned about, for example, was in the survey, when 51% of the people on sick leave said they did not have timely access to mental health programs and services if they needed them. Well, okay, you could have put that as 49% said they did. I mean, we put it as 51 said they did not. 25% of on active duty members said essentially that they would not have timely access if they needed it. So we could have put it as 75% said they did. We put it as 25% said they didn't think they would, because we feel that's an important number. 25% of the people, most of whom probably have never had to access these services, would be saying they're not sure that they were going to be able to get access to them if they needed them. To us, that's the significant message. Yes, you can talk about 75%, for example, feeling like they would, but the important thing is when they actually do need the services and they are on off-duty sick and they're getting them, then all of a sudden the number goes to 51%. And yes, there are many, it's a much smaller number, right? It's a much smaller number of people who actually have had to access those services. So the 51%, is of a small number. The 25% is of a large number. But to me, and I'm not trying to say that the RCMP is not taking this seriously or that they don't see this as important. What we're trying to say is that we think there's still significant room for them to improve on this. It's important that they improve and that they succeed, and it's important that they get support from other organizations to help them succeed. And when you have 25% of the active members that responded to the survey saying that they're essentially not sure that they would get timely access to mental health services if they need them, we think that that shows that there's significant room for improvement.
Okay. Thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit about the process, Commissioner, with the return to work. There was I'll read it here, a quote from a Canadian press story that says, "A number said they were not offered meaningful work when they returned from sick leave or believed the organization was encouraging them to accept a medical discharge." Do you mind just walking us, I think we have about 30 seconds, but walking us through as much of the process as you can on how they are assessed and who eventually makes the decision on allowing them to come back or not? That in context of that 50% number of the job come back to work, but of the job that they weren't doing prior to that.
One of the challenges that we have in bringing people back to work and engaging in the management of their case is the sort of stigma issue that attaches to members coming back in the work site not fulfilling what is, quote, the normal duties. Get in the car, take calls, investigate, get in the road, strap your gun on and go do those things. And in some of the cases, we need to have a sort of a progressive return into the work site because there's a number of conditions that are put on the person's return to the work site that prevents them from doing those things. And so I can see how some members would feel that there is a stigma attached to returning to less than full duties. That's part of the challenge that we have in order to make sure that they are managed, that their supervisors are lit up to the fact, and the team is lit up to the fact that you have to help bring these people along. And our case managers, that's why the advent of our securing of these almost 30 case managers across the country is huge. If we were in a situation, because we rely on the healthcare of all the provinces, where we could use the professional services of, some of the existing organizations that help other professions get back to work, that's what we're creating on our own sort of initiative within the organization. So it is a work in progress. It's getting better. We're improving our rate of getting people back to work. And I say this somewhat anecdotally from this chair, but I know that there's data to support it, that we are improving in terms of the stigma issues attached to mental health disability.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And now we'll go back to Ms. Mendez, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sorry. I would like first to thank you for being here today, and I'd like to underscore that, yes, this initiative does have worth. You've launched this program for mental health support for your members, and it continues to be meaningful. And as Mr. Ferguson says, it should be an example for all of government. However, and there's always a but, I would like to start with Mr. Ferguson, because we talked a lot about, or Mr. Paulson mentioned often, that you focused your audit on only 2 elements of the strategy. Can you tell us why the 3 other elements were somewhat left aside during the audit?
Merci. Donc, toujours.
Thank you. In planning an audit, it's always important to establish the things that we can examine. It's not always possible to examine all of the components in a program. So we have to decide what level of work is possible during an audit. So it's simply a process of evaluating the risk associated with all of the various aspects of the program, and we identified these two components of the strategy. Thank you very much, because I got the feeling that should be the case, but I just wanted you to mention this and make sure it was clear. I'd also like to have a look at, and this time I'm addressing my question to you, Mr. Paulson, and also to some of the things Mr. Ferguson said in the report. He said there's a lack of efficiency in judging the various stages you have developed in your strategy to meet the performance or the results that you were expecting. In terms of promotion, you're talking about promotion among the members, right? We're not talking about promotion and upgrade. And yes, I just want to make sure we agree what promotion means here. So in terms of promotion, were you successful in obtaining your objectives? And the other element, education. Were you also able to have information programs for members in terms of prevention? What are you doing? And how do you measure the success of these programs? Over the last two elements of the strategy that were audited, I'm not sure if you have performance measurement criterias to evaluate whether it was efficient or not. Thank you for your question. All the departments, not just to the government, have ways of measuring the efficiency or the efficacy in terms of mental health. It's simple to look at the figures of members who are sick, who've made claims, and it's not clear, and it's still not clear. How can we show our critics how we've been successful or the challenges that remain ahead of us? But let's talk about promotion, for example. One of your first steps is to promote the program among the members and to make them be aware of what the program is, what your strategy is. What did you do, and how were you able to measure what you were able to achieve? Simply, I'll ask Dan to help me out here a bit, but the information initiatives that all the commanders throughout the country have done with their employees. There were also management teams, had an employee campaign, and they talked about email issues. There are several ways that they've communicated the importance of the program and the existence of the program. Would you want to add anything to that? How did you measure the program? We had reports from the champions and the division, and then they talked about the initiatives that were set up from the managers. We also had the R2MR program. So we had these reports. We have the information from the R2MR, and we add it to our system, our IT system, the Human Resource Management System.
Our time is up. Just before I go back to Mr. Generu, I do want to make mention that we've been very fortunate to have the Bangladesh Public Accounts Committee with us over this last few days, and we've met with them as a committee and dined with them and compared notes. Unfortunately, they have to leave right now, but we want to wish you all the best and to thank you for joining us again here today, and all the best as you go back and continue to do a good job there in Bangladesh. Thank you, sir. We'll now go back to Mr. Generu, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while we're recognizing members in the audience today, I would like to take the member to recognize a former member of Parliament as well as a constituent of mine. The Honourable Laurie Hahn has also joined us here today. So if you give me some leverage with that,
very little.
Yes, very little. I appreciate it. I'm not going to take the full 5 minutes here, Chair. I just have one quick follow-up to some of the line of questioning that was happening earlier, and also with regards to the RCMP's opening remarks here today. Page 4, third-ish paragraph from the bottom, where it says, we are currently conducting a thorough analysis of our resource requirements to identify an adequate level of funding to properly fund all initiatives stemming from the OAG's recommendations, as well as those initiatives not covered by the audit. Simple question, when do you plan to have that analysis complete?
I may end of June. We're shooting for end of June to have that full analysis done. Working with our health offices, that's what we're shooting for, to give us an idea what type of resourcing or the gaps, so we can then reach into our commissioner, to our minister, and have that discussion.
Excellent. Sorry, will that be public, or is it you send that to the minister?
It'll be
Can be.
It will
Sure.
be reported.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thanks. That's all I have, Chair. Oh.
Thanks. Thank you for yielding your time to me. I'm interested in the peer-to-peer work that you do, because it's mentioned. Can you give us some concrete examples of how that works, and possibly even beyond that? I'm sure you've witnessed, the successful integration of someone who's had some issues, who's come back to the force. Do you have anything, without giving, obviously, the names of the people, but how does the peer-to-peer process work? And then any other actual cases that you could talk about?
So one of the things I can add. So every week on Wednesday, I have all the COs of the country on a big video screen with all of the department heads in Ottawa, and we go across the business of the nation as far as the RCMP is concerned. And every commanding officer that reports on, say, a particularly traumatic event, in fact, there was one this morning, and I won't talk about it because it's still underway, but officer-involved shootings, child deaths, high-profile investigations that happen across this land are reported in, and we hear about what they're doing. And every one of those reports now from the COs all feature an engagement for the mental health of the individual officers who are engaged, that we have secured peer-to-peer support for the member. And the peer-to-peer program is one that takes away the management sort of, I hate to use the word, but the weight of management assessing the officer's reaction to the event. And it's designed to support, in a confidential way, the employee, to make sure that they have someone to lean on, and that person can interface with our health services, with supervisors, with commanding officers, and make sure that officers are getting the support they need. Happens all the time. And that is, somewhat, again, anecdotal, but it's a shift, certainly, that has happened in recent years on how managers and senior officers are acting in the moment to help prevent, the impact of those traumatic events. And peer-to-peer is central in all of that.
Thank you.
Still have 1 minute, and so as part of the same party, I'm just going to ask a very quick question as well, and then we come back here. I have a very close friend right now in the RCMP who is off on sick leave, involved in a shooting, and at first believed there was no issue, he would be all right, finding out that he isn't. And, you know, we've heard, you know, people say that, you know, there's an expectation that sometimes you play hurt. It's like when you're a hockey player, you end up having to play hurt. And, or the suck it up and get back in there. We've been through a lot over the last couple of years with our veterans, where we've seen the same kind of issues where, you know, these guys come back not expecting that there's going to be issues and finding out all of a sudden that there is. And it may not just come on like that, it may be over a long period of time. And so there are challenges. I guess as I'm thinking here and from the testimony and the frustration in some cases that both may have, one wanting to see this succeed and the other saying, you know, it's just another report that's you know, almost not condemning but coming down hard on us. I guess the question was, is there an issue with here where we have an issue with accessing that health care? You say we access health care. We know in Veterans Affairs sometimes there was a tough time finding enough psychologists, psychiatrists. Is that part of it? Is there an issue to rural-urban split? I'm from a rural area. I know that access to some of this health care is not available like it may be if you're in downtown Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa. Are there areas where we can say, yeah, you're working on it, you're plugging away at it, but you know there are demographical, you know, reasons, there are geographical reasons. Maybe just a few comments, and then we'll go to Mr. Harvey.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that's accurate. There are geographic sort of disadvantages to some locations where our folks are because there's just no services there. And so that falls to the organization, and it also falls to the second part of my answer, which is the challenge in recognizing that people need help. That is very challenging in the mental health business in police. And so having someone, you know, who begins to act out in ways that gets them either in discipline or gets them in trouble, when really the underlying problem is a mental health issue that perhaps was overlooked by a supervisor, or perhaps the individual, him or herself, is not willing to self-identify as needing help. That's all part of our strategy. And so it's a very, you know, complex problem, particularly given how the organization is spread out. However, with the reality of the deployed decentralized model that we exist in, we have developed strategies which aren't, you know, the same for a two-person detachment in one of our territories versus someone who's in the metro area of the Lower Mainland, have access to all sorts of support. So those are challenges that feature into our strategy and that we're trying to address. Some of the systems that we have are the availability, which I have direct knowledge of myself, the availability of support through the 1-800 line, where we learn of somebody calling in and we leap into action, and we actually leap into action and get people flown out, get people flown in. But it turns on identifying the problem as a mental health issue, and also the overcoming the geographic barriers.
Thank you very much. We did go a little over because of I apologize. Mr. Harvey, please. We'll give you
for giving this time. Mr. Commissioner, and I want to thank you and your staff for being here today. I have the utmost respect for you and what you do. I got a couple quick questions, and they're centered around where we are today, where we come from, and where you're going. And you know, I commend you and your organization for taking this on and being a pioneer in it. And absolutely, over the last 5 years, there have been tremendous strides done in the mental health portion of healthcare, and recognizing some of the deficiencies. And I think that it's important that we take all those factors into account when we're here today. And I guess reflecting upon how we got to here today and the Auditor General's report, if you could go back in time, what would be the things that you would identify that you would have preferred to have done differently,
or wouldn't have done differently over the last period of 4 or 5 years, reflecting upon the Auditor General's report and the intricacies of your job. And one thing's for sure, I'm not an RCMP officer, nor am I a mental health expert. So I'm looking to you for some guidance as to, things that, best practices that you may have changed.
Yeah, and I think, it goes back to the Auditor General's report, the recommendations, and in many cases, the findings. In most cases, the findings are accurate. And had we have done that, had we have had a more sort of structured, clinical strategy and as it's referred to as a business case with sufficient funding and, more sort of milestones. Like we did it on the back of a strategy and an action plan, which has come under criticism. I think we could have done that better, and I would like to have done that better. I think that I'm very proud of the work that we've done in terms of socializing the organization. It's somewhat like working on an airplane in flight. It's hard to do because there's a million things that are going on, and there's any number of reasons why you don't focus on these kinds of things, but a more focused prevention. What I was about to say that I'm proud of is the way that the channel has changed within the organization in terms of how we talk about it. People are less inclined to be judgmental. They're very inclined to be supportive of their colleagues. I think a crisper, more precise business plan and more careful attention.
And my other question, I guess, and I want to make sure that I'm being respectful in the way that I ask this question, because I have the utmost respect for the Auditor General, and I want to make sure that he understands that I have the utmost respect for him. And my question isn't centered around this audit, because I think the audit was very well done. My question for you, though, Mr. Paulson, is: do you feel that had the audit focused on all the pillars, all the segments together, that it would have painted a different picture of the program in general? Or do you feel that the pillars stand somewhat on their own? I'm just looking for a little bit of reflection from you.
Sure. Well, I think that the recommendations as they were produced would have been produced in any case, and likely there would have been recommendations in respect of our other pillars as well. My defensiveness, and I hate to use that word because I've resisted being labeled defensive, is around the idea that, in the simplest terms, and perhaps just in my little head, we deployed in the face of a stagnant sort of environment, a mental health strategy and an action plan, and we've engaged within our existing appropriations to do a lot of things. And while we are appreciative of the recommendations, it's being seen, as we've seen from some of the style of questioning, as a sort of condemnation again of another thing that we haven't gotten right. And that is difficult for me. So
that's the end of my questions, but I really want to thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
We'll have a chance to come back for a full round for you. Mr. Christofferson.
Thanks, Chair. Your characterization is absolutely correct, and I think that's fair, and I think that's the history of the RCMP in terms of these big things and making the changes, and that's why I felt the need to, in this environment, to lay down my bona fides in policing, and I understand the complexities and all of that. But there are legitimate criticisms, and there seems to be a huge problem, first of all, getting the attention of the RCMP, then getting them to do what needs to be done, and then making sure that it gets done properly. At the end of the day, we get there, but oftentimes it's through a whole lot more, just say angst than one would hope. Now, I do want to reflect that, Commissioner, again, my own personal opinion, in the course of your answers, the tone was different. And the basic things that you said about the audit and about the findings during the course of the discussion, had they been reflected in your opening remarks, certainly my tone would have been different. That's what set me on the wrong foot to start with, was the tone. And I'm sorry, sir, but in my opinion, it comes across as defensive, borderline arrogant, in terms of a refusal to acknowledge when a problem is real. Now, I want to go back to an area, because this issue of fairness is really important. I mean, these are tough meetings. This is not meant to be fun. None of us like to be held to account. We do all the time. Every day, actually. But I want to focus on, and again, having been the civilian head of the Ontario Provincial Police, I'm somewhat familiar with policing budgets, at least as they were in my day. And I fully understand that you can have a program, and just because you don't have a business case, it doesn't mean you're not doing anything. And the fact that you're bringing a lot of resources from across the organization and bringing them to bear, I get that. But I think it's fair to say, and I think, Commissioner, unless I'm mistaken, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you said as much, that in the beginning, had the strategy been there and had there been a business plan attached to the action plan, or you know the language, the action plan, the funding there, then you probably would have had a different outcome. And so, again, I think it's fair criticism to point out that while you may be spending other money, the absence of an actual plan that spoke to the resources is a fair criticism. Do you not think so, Commissioner?
Yes, I do.
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes, good, thank you. I appreciate that. So, see, as we move along, things get better and better. Well,
I'll give you another minute.
well, we're not adjourned yet, so...
no, you're good. Keep going.
Okay, yeah. All right. You mentioned in your opening remarks, Commissioner, some of the things that you found, and I don't think anybody said it yet, but I mean, there is an appreciation to thank you for your service, because I do think you've announced, correct, that you're stepping down. So at some point, we need to acknowledge that this doesn't reflect your whole time, and much thanks for that effort and that dedication. Truly.
Thank you for that,
Truly.
but it does reflect my whole time.
Well, no,
This
not
is my
to
strategy.
me.
We put this strategy in place in 2014. That was me. So it kind of does.
Yeah. Had you approached it different, the meeting might have gone different. That's just my opinion.
But, you talked about outcomes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, we're 3 years into the plan. Like, the place isn't sinking and nothing's on fire. Like, it's valuable criticism. It's good, helpful criticism. I accept it as that. And we're working on it. We've accepted those things. We're going to implement them. We're not going to give short shrift to any of those recommendations. All we wanted is a little dignity to have our position understood on how this thing unfolded. That's all.
Well, if you want some, credit for the things we've done right, absolutely.
I want credit. I want dignity. I want some dignity.
Well, I agree. You should be seeing some dignity, and we'd like our security people around here to be showing some dignity, too, in terms of the negotiations that are going on. If we're going to have a rather wide-wielding discussion about this, they'd like to see some respect.
Our time is
well,
up.
Okay, I want to come back to the report,
Okay,
though.
time is up. We'll go to Ms. Mendez. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Shanahan and then Ms. Mendez.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, thank you to the Commissioner and the Auditor General, and both your teams for being here today, and sort of coming in on the end of this. I really do feel strongly that we have had a sort of come through something here during this session, and it's very apropos that it's about mental health, because a few years ago nobody was talking about mental health, and now everyone is talking about it, and that you took the initiative in 2014 in an environment which I can imagine was not amenable, neither externally or internally, to doing this kind of work. Kudos to you on that. That being said, I think we can all learn something from a session such as this, because as a member of this Public Accounts Committee, we rely on the Auditor General and his team for the integrity of the work that they do. And so questioning the data collection methods is not helpful, but it is something that we do need to bear in mind, that that the knife cuts both ways. That being said, this is not about got you at all. Certainly not the way that I feel, and I know we've had discussions on this. This is really about taking what has been a over time process. The Auditor General can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is over a 2-year or an 18-month process usually from the audit to preparing the report. Your responses are there. There's time to have the report scheduled, publicized, that we decide to hold the meeting, and then that there's an action plan reported. And then that action plan goes forward in time, and we actually reserve the right to come back and request updates. So please regard it in that light, that this is really a management tool, and it's only meant to be constructive criticism in every way, shape, and form. So that being said, my question, and it was partially answered before, I was concerned about the recommendation from the OAG's office, 4.43, around the preparation of the business plan. In the action plan, it does say completion date June 30th, 2017. Where are you in that business plan? What can you tell us about that? C'est peut-être Monsieur Dugault qui peut répondre là-dessus.
Thank you for the question. So what we have been at this point, so to create our business plan, we've now engaged all the health offices across the country, since it is decentralized, to understand what the issues are and the gaps, where the biggest gaps are, so that we can start building on the gaps, saying, okay, what resources do we need on the ground? 2 years into the audit, into the strategy, and Joanne is very correct in picking this up, we've learned a lot in the last 2 years of where the needs are, and now it's, okay, then how do we address the needs? So that's where we are in that, where we have the team, a working group working on this with our divisions to put together this business case so that we can actually come down to, okay, how many resources that equate to, because it will mean resources. Keeping in mind, though, when we talk about resources into our provincial counterparts, we had to get involved with our contracting partners because they do fund those resources too. So there's quite a lengthy process before we actually get resources on the ground. But we're going to land on June saying, what do we need to get this working to start with?
An important part of the equation is identifying those resources. The other thing, and this is a theme that has come up a number of times in other departments, is the quality of data collection. So that's where there was a difference of opinion. But your own data collection was not adequate. So we need to address that, and perhaps Commissioner or one of your team can address. Where are you at now in data collection?
Well, I'll start, maybe Dan can add on to this, but the data, even in the course of the audit, there was some sensitivities identified around how we are able to extract and make judgments on the back of what is very personal and private information and contained in some of these medical files. So that's one of the challenges of getting a data set that informs management at, sort of reacting to changes in the organization. And so we're working with our divisions to try and overcome those and make sure that our employees are reassured that, because there is a school of criticism around how the organization manages private personal information vis-a-vis their job. So it's a very difficult challenge, but maybe Dan can speak to some of the things they're doing around the data.
So the data stuff on the short term, once again, the advisors in play, the disability management advisors, that would be part of the role to make sure that we start documenting, because right now it's paper-based. Unfortunately, the data we have, much of it's paper-based, and that's not suiting our needs. Where we're going to, and hopefully by 2018, is keep, depending on contracting and everything else on the market, is to have another software purchase that we can plug into our human resource system that would actually just be for case management, where you'd have a lot more data and be more electronic, and then you can start pulling out trends and ensuring that the privacy is protected in there. So that's a gap that we found, that the system we currently use doesn't allow that type of information to be captured. So we're going to actually purchase one from a provider, and that's actually a major case management, or not, I call it major case management, sorry, it's discipline management software that health professionals will be able to use, and hopefully, since we are using private, public health care, we still have that issue. How do you interface when I go see my doctor and my doctor writes something on the file? How do we get it back into my organization? But we just want the occupational stuff. We don't want the other personal stuff. We just want the occupational. So still some work to do on that one. But that's where we're going with the data integrity piece.
Yeah, I could get that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our time is up as far as I'm at the committee's disposal here. Mr. Christofferson wants one more question. We have the last half hour for committee business, and there are some things we got to do on a report and on a question. What's the consensus of the crowd? You want to carry on, or do you want to shut this down right now? What's that? Mr. Jenner.
Yeah, we're scheduled to 5, are we not?
Yes.
Is that, and then you need half an hour for committee business?
Well, that's what's scheduled.
I'm supportive of shutting it down then.
All right. Yeah, okay.
Head's nodding over here.
All in favor then of concluding this aspect and moving to committee business? All in favor? But a 5-minute question is,
No.
Then Ms. Mendez has a question, and I'm not going to start in on that back and forth. So,
well, wait a minute.
Just to make a comment here, if I may, Mr. Chair, and I agree that we should shut up. We need to deal with committee business. But there are still some questions that are left over. Is it possible, and I'm asking because I have no idea if this is possible, that we put down our questions in writing and send them to both the Auditor General and the Commissioner and then ask for answers? Is it possible?
that is possible, and it's possible for them at any time to submit answers, to supplement answers, and to...
Because I do have a question, but it's reasonably complicated, and I wouldn't expect it to be answered in 3 minutes, so...
Well, I'm not going to extend it for one, and so I have others that have said they want it, but so I'll take that then as a motion or a carrying on the adjournment of this portion of it. I want to thank you for coming today and for your testimony. I think, Commissioner, we obviously do thank you for your service. And I know this summer you are taking a well-deserved retirement, and I think you can look back with a great deal of accomplishments for the RCMP. In areas like this, we all realize, whether it's RCMP or others, that this evaluation was done midway through the strategy delivery of it. However, we expect that those recommendations are going to be responded to in an orderly way, and we'll see improvement. And so I think that you can pretty well expect that next fall we're going to be you'll be required to come back or to at least fill us in on an update as to how these are going, because these are, we're talking about people's lives here, and everyone expects that these types of issues, mental health issues, although they're very difficult to understand and to deal with, are being dealt with. And so we can expect that. So thank you for being here. All the best. And to our Auditor General, thank you again for a good report. We will suspend for 2 minutes so that they can make their leave. Then we go in camera to deal with some very important committee business.
you.